This is such an amazing turnout. This is so fun. It's great to be here. I run a company called CrowdFlower. We are one of those companies that sells data for millions of dollars. Mostly to data scientists, though. Any customers in the audience? Any users? Awesome. Cool. So we do sell data, but I'm here actually to talk about, ironically, how important it is to make data freely available and open source. So first I'm going to talk about why data is important, and then I'm going to talk about why open data is especially important. So you guys are data scientists, data analysts. You probably think data is important. I'm going to show you a couple of graphs. I think it's even more important than you think it is. So this is actually why I got into data labeling in the first place. So I used to work on building new algorithms, and you see in thousands of papers graphs like on the left here, or on the right, I guess, where you compare the fancy algorithms in green and the sort of baseline simple algorithms in red. And you see that here lower is higher accuracy, or so less error rate. So you can see that the green algorithm does consistently beat the red algorithm, the baseline algorithm, across many different sizes of training data. And also, I replicated this with my own data set. This is a sentiment task using scikit-learn with naive Bayes, maximum entropy model, and an SVM. And you can see that the SVM would be probably considered a little bit more machinery than a naive Bayes model. And you can see that I improved the accuracy from around 19% to 17%. And this is definitely the kind of thing that gets papers published, and it's definitely a useful thing to come up with better algorithms. But there's an easier way, right? So I think many people realize that when you get to the real world and you work on real machine learning, you realize feature selection is super important, right? So I took my scikit-learn and I tried my same task with unigrams and then bigrams. So bigrams would be the pairs of words. And unigrams is just showing the algorithm the individual words. So sometimes the pairs of words have meaning. And in my data set, I guess they did. So my error rate went down when I showed it bigrams. And then when I showed it unigrams and bigrams together, it actually got even better, which is great. And you see lots and lots of papers. I just pulled one almost at random where the bigrams improve things over the unigrams sometimes. But the issue with feature selection, it can be really powerful, but it's also really difficult, right? Every task that you work on has kind of different features work better or worse. And when I first was working as a data scientist, I spent all my time on this feature selection. And as you guys know, you try 100 things and maybe 5 of them actually really work, right? And you rack your brain for how can I come up with more features to improve my algorithms. But there's an easier way, and it's a simple way, and it's actually in that first graph, which is just to get more data, right? And this almost always works, right? And so it's funny to look at this graph with my new perspective, this graph on the right here from this paper, where they're showing that their green algorithm is beating the red algorithm, but actually they don't need the extra machinery if they just double their training data size, right? So it's such a simple thing they could have done to get the same level of performance. They wouldn't have needed to go through all this fancy machinery. And I also saw it in my own data on this task, my own proprietary. Actually, I opened up this data, so you can replicate my results. But here I took, I think it was around 10,000 sentiment labels, and then I doubled it to 20,000, and then doubled again to around 40,000. And my accuracy got much, much better, right? And so I think a lot of people think that they can't do that because it's often hard to get access to data, which is why it's so important to make data available so that companies can compete. And then finally, there's one more thing that I can't help but mention, because this thing is so unstudied. I actually couldn't find a paper to show this effect. And if you do know of a paper, please send it to me. But this is the easiest thing you can do, which is clean up your data. Right? People never spend enough time on doing this, right? I always talk to teams, and always this is kind of when I talk to a data science team, you always find out, man, there's some data set that if you just clean that up, you get better results. It's kind of the least fun thing to do, always so effective, right? So this is my same data set that I publish online, but if you take it from 90% to 95%, you actually have the error rate, and then going up to 100%, you have it again, right? So this is like amazing results, right? And pretty simple, right? Pretty simple thing to do. I recommend doing it. And so then you see like all these New York Times articles, and we find this too, where it's like, okay, data scientists spend most of their time cleaning data, and some people say they spend the rest of their time complaining about cleaning data. And I think it's this is kind of crazy, right? It's just so hard to get good clean data sets to work on. And I think it's because there's not the same kind of open source movement has made so much great open source software, but there's not a lot of great open data out there. And I hope that changes. So just a quick, this is the only, I just want to show you kind of what CrowdFlower does, because I do have a data cleanup product. So this is an actual screenshot where you can clean up, this is actually a satellite company is trying to mark the clouds in an image. But this is what we do. But in the very early days when we just started the product, this was like the very first, we created our product and we thought, millions of customers are going to bang down the door because clean data is so important, and we have a data cleanup product. And of course, nobody shows up. So we're sitting there with the product, and we thought, what can we do with this? I kind of want to like play with this product where we can, we can send out tasks to people and get them to label them in different ways. So the very first job I ever ran was showing people blocks of color and asking them what they were. And I think this is because my co-founder drives me crazy. I think he's colorblind, but doesn't realize it. And so we're always fighting about what you call colors. And it's really interesting, right? So you show these blocks of colors, and you say, hey, what color is this? And then we created this cool visualization of all the different colors that people said. Right? I just think it's kind of neat to look at. And this was it was kind of a fun sort of content post that people were into. And I kind of thought that was the end of it. But I thought, what? We collected that data. It maybe cost us $100 to get 10,000 labels. Why don't we just put it online and see if anybody wants it, see if there's anything we can do with it, right? So we just published it without comment, had a download link. And almost immediately, someone from I think it's SAP came in and cleaned up our data set for us. Right? And so they did some things that you might want to do depending on the application, right? So they fixed our capitalization, which you may or may want, depending on the application, you might want that or not. They fixed the spelling errors, which again you might or might not want that. They removed some kind of weird stuff, and then they republished it, right? So this is great. So now there's like a second data set with actually another purpose that other folks can use. And then we saw. And then an artist, this came out a little blurry, but made this even far better visualization than we had, this crazy tag cloud, where the size of the text is based on how many people said it. So you can actually see like a really common color would be green, and this is like the average green, that like all the average of all the colors that people called green. And there's like turquoise is like a little smaller, and then like cerulean's in there. It's just like very specific color that probably only the artists in our labeling workforce would choose. And then visualization tools started using us as a data set to show off their tool, which is great because there's just not a lot of interesting publicly available data sets at that time. I think this is starting to change, but we started to see tools use us as demo products. And then we saw this student made an awesome application for colorblind people where you can highlight a block of an image, and it'll tell you not just the red, green, and blue values of that block, but it'll tell you kind of what's the closest colors that people would call that. So it says, here is like sky blue and navy blue, right? And kind of a richer description of what people would call this, which I'm told is super useful for people with certain types of color blindness. And I'm pretty sure that he wouldn't have made this if the data set wasn't publicly available. It only cost us about $100 to generate it, but this was a student, and it took some work to make it, and then it took another person some work to clean it up. But by having a publicly available data set here, we were able to make a niche app that's really useful for a certain group of people. And so that got me pretty excited about that data. And we've kind of made other data sets publicly available since then. In sort of the same vein as CB Insights, trying to just get people's attention, right? So after the Apple Watch came out, and again, my co-founder, I think, inspires this stuff. I mean, he buys every Apple product, and I was like, what are people saying about it? And so we asked a bunch of questions to our workforce. Hey, not just is there positive and negative sentiment, but why are they liking the watch or not liking the watch? I was genuinely curious, and then we actually, instead of sending out to journalists the like the CrowdFlower analysis, we actually sent them the data and kind of let them draw their own conclusions. And so we got different types of conclusions that were relevant to different types of publications. So, so here we're saying it got a 55% approval rating right across the board. But then, you know, a publication in Texas wrote about Texans aren't thrilled about the new Apple Watch, right? Which is great. You know, it's great for people in Texas and way more relevant for that audience, and kind of got us out of the sort of TechCrunch bubble that we're often in. And then another journalist took this and wrote about, you know, women love the Apple Watch more than men, which is kind of an interesting, interesting conclusion. And so then I was thinking about it. You know, we had all this we keep making these data sets publicly available, and it's also driving me crazy that people kept collecting the exact same data within our platform. So I was looking at the number of jobs found with sentiment in the title, and there's 11,000 jobs were run with collecting sentiment on various things, right? So there's like amazing overlap in our system of companies doing the exact same thing. And I thought, I wonder if people would be willing to share the data with each other, right? So we made a big launch in TechCrunch, and we said, you know, hey, if you want to, when you order a job, you can actually click a button that says, hey, I'm going to make my data publicly available. And so, you know, a few people did it. We collected about 10 million rows of kind of open data, and people used it. But then, and we actually made a Data for Everyone library here, right? So you can actually go to this at crowdflower.com/data for everyone, and you can download all kinds of funny data sets and just see the kinds of crazy things that people are interested in collecting. Everything from, you know, like what's in this image to can I understand the label on this medication to objective truths of sentences and concept pairs. But the real breakthrough came when we said, okay, we're going to let people use our platform for free if they make the data publicly available. That actually changed everything. And it got, so you can see where this graph changes here, right? So that was like, yeah, hockey stick, but unfortunately not revenue, just data. And actually data that we're saying is free. So you can see late 2014, we changed the terms of service. But what's awesome is now there's all this data that's available for you guys to use, right? So, and for lots of different applications. Actually, the biggest problem we have right now is organizing this data in a way that people can find the stuff that they're looking for. So just some quick highlights of stuff that I was looking through and thought was interesting. There's all kinds of URL collection data, which I think CB Insights may be interested in. So this is and actually, here's the other thing about this data, is you can see exactly how it's collected, which I think is super important, right? So you can know kind of all the biases and all the effort that went into to making it when you use it. So you can see exactly the instructions, exactly the rules. Sometimes I find with human-generated data sets, when you can't find that information, it can be really tricky to kind of piece it together. We have lots of data pulled from PDFs, which I think would be great if somebody's trying to start an OCR application. This would be a great way to test your data or train your algorithms. There's all kinds of different entity extraction tasks in lots of different languages. There's text summarization, and this is actually, I think it's in Swedish, which we do not officially support Swedish, but it was interesting that it worked. and I was playing with Google Translate, and the results seem reasonably accurate to me. Not speaking Swedish. I don't know if anyone wants to comment. Again, you know, this is the great thing about making it all open, is you can see it and you can judge and you can tell me if the data is working for you. Is an image funny? I think it's great. We have maybe the biggest data set available on is an image funny. I'm not sure why somebody wanted that. I'm not sure if anyone will ever use it, but if you do, please let me know. But then more seriously, we have lots of medical images, right, which I think is a really interesting collection for serious use cases. Attributes of people, so gender, age, height, weight of various photos of people. And then finally, one of the best uses of this that I found was we actually ran some of it through a Kaggle competition, which was great because, you know, a lot of times it's hard to get data that you can actually use for a Kaggle competition, but we were sitting on a mountain of it. So we took search relevance data that I thought would be really useful for anyone trying to start a new e-commerce site or a new search algorithm. and gave it to Kaggle and had them look at the data and spend time figuring out the best ways to model it. And so taking that open data led to lots of insights. I'm so excited to tell you about this because it's actually all available and free, and it's at CrowdFlower/data for everyone. And some of the exciting things that I'm seeing people do is benchmark their machine learning algorithms in a way that you can see all the different types of algorithms and really see what algorithm works better on a wide range of tasks. Thanks.
Thank you. So you told us a lot about this open data project. Tell us more actually about CrowdFlower, the company. What do you guys do? The data enrichment platform, the categorization, all the things. How does that work?
Sure. So we take data labeling tasks, typically for machine learning applications, and you set up what you want, and we send it out to our workforce of people. And I can guess your question is, how are we different than Mechanical Turk? So one is that we're totally focused on data labeling. And so we're really obsessed with making sure that the quality of the results is high.
And so what kind of companies do you work with?
Well, we work with Bloomberg. I was just here, yeah. We work with any company that has a data science team, typically. So that tends to be retail companies and financial services and technology companies. So we tend to work with bigger companies because I think they tend to be more early adopters of data science teams. But basically, if you have somebody at your company with the title data scientist, then we probably have a good solution for you. And if you have somebody at your company with the title chief data officer, then we definitely have a good solution for you.
Very good. All right, do we have questions? Right here.
Hi, I'm Grant from IBM. I'm kind of interested. So when companies come to you, what is that, in data labeling is your MO. Mm-hmm. What is the typical use case? You showed us, is this picture funny? What are companies coming to you ask of your workers and volunteers?
Let's take an example. So CB Insights is not a customer, but should be. So we just saw them do that. They talked about a bunch of stuff that they do around, they want to find out private company funding amounts, right? So they probably build a bunch of scrapers that use some advanced algorithms to kind of look at the news and see who's acquiring who, right? So if they wanted to collect training data for those scrapers, because as you know, machine learning generally needs training data, right? So they would have people look at a whole bunch of news articles and say, okay, who's acquiring who here, right? And then they would feed that into their algorithms, and it would figure out, okay, what are the verbs that mean acquire? How do we pull out the entities? How do we know that IBM is the same as Watson, right? All those tricky things. And so they could use it to train their algorithms, and then they could use it to test that algorithm, right? So they could say, okay, is my scraper working? Maybe I take a subset of that and send it to human beings through CrowdFlower and just check that it's accurate. You asked about use cases. It's all the stuff that people do machine learning on. So all kinds of vision recognition, sentiment analysis, business data collection, all the natural language processing, extracting entities, extracting meaning from text, search relevance, all this kind of basic machine learning tasks is what people typically do with us.
Very cool. Good. All right, one more.
Where's the workforce? Where are the crowd? Where's the crowd?
Sure.
Where are they from? Yeah,
where are they from? So, yeah. So people can log into our site from all around the world. They typically do. So we have a big global presence because we pay everyone the same regardless of what country you come in from. There's a lot of super smart people in India and Philippines, but it's also 30% US based. And then we have a large pool of folks in Europe just because there's so much demand for European language, non-English European language work. Yeah.
Hi, you mentioned your laser focus on quality. Can you talk a little bit about how you do manage quality with the crowd of people working?
Sure, sure. I could talk forever about that. So I'll keep it short. I mean, there's no silver bullet. So it's like millions of lead bullets. I think I thought when I started the company, I was like I was a machine learning guy, so I thought, oh, I'll just do like a fancy machine learning algorithm that will figure out who's good and who's bad. And we do that. But there's also a lot of correlated error, right? So there's a lot, I mean, no matter what your job is, there's going to be some parts that are just tricky for everyone where like, even if we don't collaborate, we get it wrong in the same way. So we do things like you can set up test questions where you hide in questions that you know are tricky and you know the answer. And if people get them wrong, then you don't want them to access your job anymore. You want to give them feedback that, hey, you got it wrong. We also do quite a lot of work on giving the folks doing the work the ability to kind of feed back to you and say, hey, that was confusing. This part of your task is confusing to me. Like, you should maybe change the way you worded the instructions. And then we have kind of a library of widgets and templates that, because so many use cases are common, we have kind of best practice templates that you can start from where it's kind of set up to be successful. That's a handful, but find me after, email me, and I'll give you the list. Yeah.
Wait, one last question.
Sorry, can you just elaborate a bit more on pricing if the task is very specific, and also do people use your labeling technology for very low signal to noise environment? Do you have examples of very low signal to noise environment where the answer is very subjective? Success examples or examples where people might use it. In particular, trading, for example.
So, like what?
Trading, hedge funds, that kind of stuff.
Well, I don't recommend using CrowdFlower directly to. I think if you ask 100 people about what the market's going to do, you're unlikely to get signal out of that. But I think that every job is a lot more subjective than folks think. So, like saying, like, is this a good search result or a bad search result is something that lots of folks do with our platform and is pretty subjective. So, we work hard to make that possible. If you're just doing surveys or something completely subjective, that's sort of outside the scope of what CrowdFlower wants to do. So, we don't recommend using our platform for surveys, but we do recommend using it for somewhat subjective data labeling. And so the platform figures out that, hey, some of these questions, it makes sense that, someone thinks it's a good search result, someone thinks it's a bad search result. That's okay. But there's probably some cases where you search for something, you know what the right search result is. And if people are getting that one wrong, then you say, okay, we're worried about the quality here. And in terms of pricing, so we have a platform fee to use our software. And then we take up to a 20% cut of the work that flows through our platform.
Great. Well, Lukas, thank you very much for being here. This was fun. Thank you.